I arrived at Wrexham, and having taken a very hearty breakfast at the principal inn, for I felt rather hungry after a morning's walk of 10 miles, I walked about the town. The town is reckoned a Welsh town, but its appearance is not Welsh. Its inhabitants have neither the look nor language of Welshmen, and its name shows that it was founded by some Saxon adventurer, Wrexham being a Saxon compound, signifying the home or habitation of Rex or Rag, and identical, or nearly so, with the Wrexham of East Anglia. It is a stirring, bustling place of much traffic and of several thousand inhabitants. Its most remarkable object is its church, which stands at the southwestern side. To this church, after wandering for some time about the streets, I repaired. The tower is quadrangular and is at least 100 feet high. It has on its summit 4 little turrets, one at each corner, between each of which are 3 spiralets, the middlemost of the 3 the highest. The nave of the church is to the east. It is of 2 stories, both crenellated at the top. I wished to see the interior of the church, but found the gate locked. Observing a group of idlers close at hand, with their backs against a wall, I went up to them and, addressing myself to one, inquired whether I could see the church. "Oh yes, sir," said the man. "The clerk who has the key lives close at hand. One of us shall go and fetch him, and by the by, I may as well go myself." He moved slowly away. He was a large, bulky man of about the middle age, and his companions were about the same age and size as himself. I asked him if they were Welsh. "Yes, sir," said one. "I suppose we are, for they call us Welsh." I asked if any of them could speak Welsh. "No, sir," said the man. "All the Welsh that any of us know, or indeed wish to know, is Cwrw da." Here there was a general laugh. Cwrw da signifies good ale. I at first thought that the words might be intended as a hint for a treat, but I was soon convinced of the contrary. There was no greedy expectation in his eyes, nor indeed of those of his companions, though they all looked as though they were fond of good ale. I inquired whether much Welsh was spoken in the town, and was told very little. When the man returned with the clerk, I thanked him. He told me I was welcome, and then went and leaned with his back against the wall. He and his mates were probably a set of boon companions, enjoying the air after a night's bout at drinking. I was subsequently told that all the people of Wrexham are fond of good ale. The clerk unlocked the church door and conducted me in. The interior was modern, but in no respects was remarkable. The clerk informed me that there was a Welsh service every Sunday afternoon in the church, but very few people attended, and those few were almost entirely from the country. He said that neither he nor the clergyman were natives of Wrexham. He showed me the Welsh Church Bible, and at my request read a few verses from the sacred volume. He seemed a highly intelligent man. I gave him something which appeared to be more than he expected, and departed, after inquiring of him the road to Llangollen. I crossed the bridge, for there is a bridge and a stream too at Wrexham. The road at first bore due west, but speedily took a southern direction. I moved rapidly over an undulating country. A region of hills, or rather of mountains, lay on my right hand. At the entrance of a small village, a poor, sickly-looking woman asked me for charity. "Are you Welsh or English?" said I. "Welsh," she replied, "but I speak both languages, as do all the people here." I gave her a halfpenny. She wished me luck, and I proceeded. I passed some huge black buildings, which a man told me were collieries, and several carts laden with coal, and soon came to Llangollen, a large village about halfway between Wrexham and Llangollen. I observed in this place nothing remarkable but an ancient church. My way from here lay nearly west. I ascended a hill, from the top of which I looked down into a smoky valley. I descended, passing by a great many collieries, in which I observed grimy men working amidst smoke and flame. At the bottom of the hill, near a bridge, I turned round. A ridge to the east particularly struck my attention. It was covered with dusky edifices, from which proceeded thundering sounds and puffs of smoke. A woman passed me going towards Wrexham. I pointed to the ridge and asked its name. I spoke English. The woman shook her head and replied, "Dim Seisneg." "This is as it should be," said I to myself. "I now feel I am in Wales." I repeated the question in Welsh. "Cefn Bach," she replied, which signifies the little ridge. "Diolch I ti," I replied, and proceeded on my way. I was now in a wide valley. Enormous hills were on my right. The road was good, and above it, on the side of a steep bank, there was a causeway intended for foot passengers. It was overhung with hazel bushes. I walked along it to its termination, which was at Llangollen. I found my wife and daughter at the principal inn. They had already taken a house. We dined together at the inn. During the dinner we had music, for a Welsh harper, stationed in the passage, played upon his instrument. "Oh, of his surety," said I am in Wales. The northern side of the Vale of Llangollen is formed by certain enormous rocks, called the Llangollen rock, which extends from east to west, a distance of about 2 miles. The southern side is formed by the Berwyn Hills. The valley is intersected by the River Dee, the origin of which is a deep lake near Bala, about 20 miles to the west. Between the Dee and the Llangollen rise a lofty hill, on the top of which are the ruins of Dinas Bran, which bears no slight resemblance to a crown. The upper part of the hill is bare, with the exception of what is covered by the ruins. On the lower part there are enclosures and trees, with here and there a grove or farmhouse. On the other side of the valley, to the east of Llangollen, is a hill called Pennacoed, beautifully covered with trees of various kinds. It stands between the river and the Berwyn, even as the hill of Dinas Bran stands between the river and the Llangollen rocks. It does not, however, confront Dinas Bran, which stands more to the west. Llangollen is a small town, or large village, of white houses with slate roofs. It contains about 2,000 inhabitants, and is situated principally on the southern side of the Dee. At the western end it has an ancient bridge and a modest, unpretending church nearly in its centre, in the chancel of which rests the immortal remains of an old bard called Griffith Hiriog. From some of the houses on the southern side there is a noble view, Dinas Bran and its mighty hill forming the principal objects. The view from the northern part of the town, which is indeed little more than a suburb, is not quite as good, but is nevertheless highly interesting. The eastern entrance to the Vale of Llangollen is much wider than the western, which is overhung by bulky hills. There are many pleasant villas on both sides of the river, some of which stand a considerable way up the hill. Of the villas, the most noted is Plas Newydd at the foot of the Berwyn, built by 2 Irish ladies of high rank who resided in it for nearly half a century and were celebrated throughout Europe by the names of the Ladies of Llangollen. The view of the hill of St Dinas Bran from the southern end of Llangollen would be much more complete were it not for a bulky excrescence towards its base, which prevents the gazer from obtaining a complete view. The name of Llangollen signifies the church of Collen, and the vale and village take their name from the church, which was originally dedicated to St. Collen. although some, especially the neighbouring peasantry, suppose that Llangollen is a compound of Llan, a church, and Collen, a hazelwood, and the church was called the Church of the Hazelwood from the number of hazels in its neighbourhood. Collen, according to a legendary life which exists of him in Welsh, was a Briton by birth and of illustrious ancestry. He served for some time abroad as a soldier against Julian the Apostate, and slew a pagan champion who challenged the best man among the Christians. Returning to his own country, he devoted himself to religion and became abbot of Glastonbury, but subsequently retired to a cave on the side of a mountain, where he lived a life of great austerity. The valley of the Dee, of which the Llangollen district forms a part, is called in the British tongue Glendaith y Dwy, that is, the Valley of the Dwy, or Dee. The celebrated Welsh chiefman, generally known as Owen Glendower, was surnamed after this valley, the whole of which belonged to him, and which had 2 or 3 places of strength, though his general abode was a castle in Sycharth, a valley to the south-east of the Berwyn, and distant about 12 miles from Llangollen. Dinas Bran, which crowns the top of the mighty hill on the northern side of the valley, is a ruined stronghold of unknown antiquity. The name is generally supposed to signify Crow Castle, Bran being the British word for crow, and flocks of crows being frequently seen hovering over it. It may, however, mean the castle of Bran or Brennus, or the castle above the Bran, a brook which flows at its foot. Dinas Bran was a place quite impregnable in the old time, and served as a retreat to Griffith, son of Mordag, from the rage of his countrymen, who were incensed against him because, having married Emma, the daughter of James Lord Audley, he had, at the instigation of his wife and father-in-law, sided with Edward I against his own native sovereign. But though it could shield him from his foes, it could not preserve him from remorse and the stings of conscience, of which he speedily died. At present the place consists only of a few ruined walls, and probably consisted of little more 200 or 300 years ago. Roger Cuffin, a Welsh bard who flourished at the beginning of the 17th century, wrote an Llangollen upon it, of which the following is a translation. Gone, gone are thy gates, Dinas Bran on the height. Thy warders are blood crows and ravens, I trow. Now no one will wend from the field of the fight to the fortress on high, save the raven and crow. The house or cottage, for it was called a cottage though it consisted of 2 stories, in which my wife had procured lodgings for us, was situated in the northern suburb. Its front was towards a large perlan or orchard, which sloped down gently to the bank of the Dee. Its back was towards the road leading from Wrexham, behind which was a high bank, on the top of which was a canal, called in Welsh the Camlas, whose commencement was up the valley about 2 miles west. A little way up the road towards Wrexham was the vicarage, and a little way down was a flannel factory, beyond which was a small inn, with pleasure grounds, kept by an individual who had once been a gentleman's servant. The mistress of the house was a highly respectable widow, who, with the servant maid, was to wait upon us. It was as agreeable a place in all respects as people like ourselves could desire. As I and my family sat at tea in our parlour about an hour or 2 after we had taken possession of our lodgings, the door of the room and that of the entrance to the house being open, on account of the fineness of the weather, a poor black cat entered hastily, sat down on the carpet by the table, looked up towards us, and mewed piteously. I had never seen so wretched a looking creature. It was so dreadfully attenuated, being little more than skin and bone, and was sorely afflicted with an eruptive malady. And here I may as well relate the history of the cat previous to our arrival, which we subsequently learned by bits and snatches. It had belonged to a previous vicar of Llangollen, and had been left behind at his departure. His successor brought him dogs and cats, who, conceiving that the late vicar's cat had no business at the vicarage, drove it forth to seek another home, which, however, it could not find. Almost all the people of the suburb were dissenters, as indeed were the generality of the people of Llangollen, and knowing the cat to be a church cat, not only would not harbour it, but did all they could to make it miserable. While the few who were not dissenters would not receive it into their homes, either because they had cats of their own or dogs, or did not want a cat, so that the cat had no home and was dreadfully persecuted by 9/10 of the suburb. Oh, there was never a cat so persecuted as that poor Church of England animal, and solely on the account of the opinions which it was supposed to have imbibed in the house of its late master. For I never could learn that the dissenters of the suburb, nor indeed of Llangollen in general, were in the habit of persecuting other cats. The cat was a Church of England cat, and that was enough. Stone it, hang it, drown it, with the cries of almost everybody. If the workmen of the flannel factory, all of whom were Calvinistic Methodists, chanced to get a glimpse of it in the road from the windows of the building, they would sally forth in a body, and with sticks, stones, or for want of other weapons, with clots of horse dung, of which there was always plenty on the road, would chase it up the high bank, or perhaps over the Camlass. The inhabitants of a small street between our house and the factory, leading from the road to the river, all of whom were dissenters, if they saw it moving about the purlan into which the black back windows looked, would shriek and hoot at it, and fling anything of no value which came easily to hand at the head or body of the ecclesiastical cat. The good woman of the house, who, though an excellent person, was a bitter dissenter, whenever she saw it upon a ground or heard it was there, would make after it, frequently attended by her maid Margaret and her young son, a boy of about 9 years of age, both of whom hated the cat, and were always ready to attack it, either alone or in company. And no wonder, the maid being not only a dissenter but a class teacher, and the boy not only a dissenter but intended for the dissenting ministry. Where it got its food, and food is sometimes must have got, for even a cat, an animal known to have 9 lives, cannot live without food, was only known to himself, as was the place where it lay. For even a cat must lie down sometimes. Though a labouring man who occasionally dug in the garden told me he believed that in the springtime it ate freshets, that is, from snow melt. And the woman in the house once said that she believed it sometimes slept in the hedge, which hedge, by the by, divided our Perthland from the vicarage grounds, which were very extensive. Well might the cat, having led this kind of life for better than 2 years, look mere skin and bone when it made its appearance in our apartment, and have an eruptive malady, and also a bronchitic cough, for I remember it had both. How it came to make its appearance there is a mystery, for it had never entered a house before, even when there were lodgers. That it should not visit the woman who was its declared enemy was natural enough, but why did it not visit her other lodgers? Why did it not visit her other lodgers? Why? Sorry. That it should not visit the woman who was its declared enemy was natural enough, but why, if it did not visit her other lodgers, did it visit us? Did instinct keep it aloof from them? Did instinct draw it towards us? We gave it some bread and butter and a little tea with milk and sugar. It ate and drank and soon began to purr. The good woman of the house was horrified when, coming in to remove the things, she saw the church cat on her carpet. "What impudence!" she exclaimed, and made towards it, but on her telling us we did not expect that it should be disturbed, she let it alone. A very remarkable circumstance was that although the cat had hitherto been in the habit of flying not only from her face, but the very echo of her voice, it now looked her in the face with perfect composure, as much as to say, "I don't fear you, for I now know that I am safe and with my own people." It stayed with us 2 hours and then went away. The next morning it returned. To be short, though it went away every night, it became our own cat and one of our family. It gave us something which cured it. I gave it something which cured it of its eruption, and through good treatment it soon lost its other ailments and began to look sleek and bonny. Next morning I set out to ascend Dinas Bran. A number of children, almost entirely girls, followed me. I asked them why they came after me. "In the hope that you will give us something," said one in a very good English. I told them that I should give nothing, but they still followed me. A little way up the hill I saw some men cutting hay. I made an observation to one of them respecting the fineness of the weather. He answered civilly and rested on his scythe, while the others pursued their work. I asked him whether he was a farming man. He told me he was not, that he generally worked at the flannel manufactory, but that for some days past he had not been employed there, work being slack, and had on that account joined the mowers in order to earn a few shillings. I asked him how it was that he knew how to handle a scythe, not being brought up a farming man. He smiled and said that somehow or other he had learned to do so. "You speak very good English," said I. "Have you much Welsh?" "Plenty," said he. "I am a real Welshman." "Can you read Welsh?" said I. "Oh yes," he replied. "What books have you read?" said I. "I have read the Bible, sir, and one or two other books." "Did you ever read the Barth Cwsig?" said I. He looked at me with some surprise. "No," said he, after a moment or two. "I have never read it. I have seen it, but it is far too deep Welsh for me." "I have read it," said I. "Are you a Welshman?" said he. "No," said I am an Englishman." "And how is it," said he, "that you can read Welsh without being a Welshman?" "I learned to do so," said I, "even as you learn to mow without being bred up to farming work." "Ah," said he, "but it is easier to learn how to mow than to read the Barth Cwsig." "I don't know that," said I. "I have taken up a scythe 100 times, but I cannot mow." "Will your honour take mine now and try again?" said he. "No," said I, "for if I take your scythe in hand I must give you a shilling. You know that by mower's law." He gave a broad grin, and I proceeded up the hill. When he rejoined his companions, he said something to them in Welsh, at which they all laughed. I reached the top of the hill, the children still attending me. The view over the vale is very beautiful, but on no side, except in the direction of the Welsh, is it very extensive, Dinas Bran being on all other sides overtopped by other hills. In that direction, indeed, the view is extensive enough, reaching on a fine day even to the Wythfa, or Peak of Snowdon, a distance of 60 miles at least, as some say, who perhaps ought to add that is to very good eyes, which mine are not. The day that I made my first ascent of Dinas Bran was very clear, but I do not think I saw the Wythfa then from the top of the Dinas Bran. It is true that I might have seen it without knowing it, being utterly unacquainted with it, except by name, but I repeat that I do not think I saw it, and I am quite sure that I did not see it from the top of Dinas Bran on any subsequent ascent, on a day equally clear, when if I had seen the Wythfa, I must have recognised it, having been at its top. As I stood gazing around, the children danced about the grass and sang and sung. The song was English. I descended the hill, they followed me to its foot, and then left me. The children of the lower class of Llangollen are great pests to visitors. The best way to get rid of them is to give them nothing. I followed that plan and was not long troubled by them.